Good afternoon, good morning, maybe good evening, depending on where you may be joining us from on the webinar today. I want to thank everyone for being on here with us. I'm Denny Chapman, partner at the Chapman Group, and I'm excited to share with you today some best practices that you all will be able to utilize to help use some of the customer feedback you currently have or feedback that you're going to be getting in order to help improve the quality of that relationship network and gain access into the executive suite where those decision makers and power brokers all lie. Just a couple of administrative things before we get started so everyone knows if they're not familiar. Inside the webinar application, probably the window on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a chat bar. If you have any questions, if you have any comments or anything that you'd like to say or voice our way, please use that. We'll take some time out at the end to address any overarching questions or concerns, and along the way, if something is topical in the middle of the presentation, we'll do our best to address it at the moment it comes in. So please don't be shy at all. Get your questions answered. It's a great opportunity to take advantage and pick the brain of someone who has been utilizing customer feedback and different processes involved with clients and accounts to help really build out relationship networks and C-level relationships. Dennis Chapman's been doing that now for longer than he would ever want to admit on the phone to a bunch of people that he might not know too well. But it is a great opportunity for you. One other thing, and I'll come back at the end to highlight for everyone, but we will send out a copy of the slides and also a link to the webinar if you have to leave early or would like to share. This is all being recorded for you so that it can reside in the history of the interwebs for the knowledge to be propagated amongst all successful business executives forever. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully everybody will be able to see the PowerPoint slide pop up. And I don't want to delay because I'm not necessarily the one with all the smarts on the phone or great insights to share with you today. So I'm going to hand over the microphone to Dennis Sr., and he's going to take about the next 30 minutes to give you all a nice crash course on how customer feedback can gain you access into the C-suite of your customers.
Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending where everyone is, and really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule. My goal, Dennis Chapman of the Chapman Group, is to provide you as much value as I can in probably the next 25 to 30 minutes on what I think is probably one of the most hot topics that I experience out there with our clients, as well as just in general at conferences or business. This whole topic of, how do I more effectively get my team or myself to engage at the executive level or the C-suite. So we're gonna talk through that today, and I think the significant twist here is that we've integrated in it how valuable feedback that you may be gathering somehow, and we'll talk to that during the course of this webinar, utilizing feedback as another potential mechanism or strategy to take us there. Today, our topics that we're going to dive into a little bit in depth are, what are today's senior level executives thinking about? There's no mystery. Over probably the last 10, 15 years, there's been some pretty dramatic changes in our global economy, whether economics is playing a big role, as well as where the influence and power in organizations is or resides based on mergers, acquisitions, consolidations. The other thing we're going to dive into is, customer feedback in general. What is it? What kind of intelligence is that? Because many of us have lived in a world where many of us think we get customer feedback today. I want to talk about maybe some of the differences in that satisfaction feedback might be versus the customer feedback that's going to gain us access and credibility at the C-level. Also would like to talk about some strategies during this webinar. Strategies of how to best use the feedback. So we're going to go through at least 4 to 5 strategies on how to do that, and finish with where this would fit, some opportunities to use this approach we're talking about today within our daily operating work stream, within our customer management systems or our engagement processes. So recently I had lunch with a fairly significant CEO of a major organization, and I'll paraphrase what I thought was one of his most prophetic statements during the lunch. And he basically said, look, I'm a very busy person. I pay a lot of people a lot of money to do and work with our suppliers, and the last thing I really have time to do is to meet with salespeople. And then he added on that, he said, and one of the driving issues I'm faced with every day is my marketplace, and in this particular case he was in the healthcare marketplace, is changing so rapidly that for me to best serve my organization in the marketplace, I've got to spend most of my time dealing with those kind of issues. I also would like to tell you a quick little story about a personal experience I had very recently. I was actually meeting with a prospective new client. It would have been a little better if it was an existing client, but it was actually the management team of a multi-billion-dollar organization, including the CEO. And it was quite interesting that that they controlled the beginning of the meeting and right out of the box asked me a question and basically said, you know, why are you here and how are you going to help me? And I didn't even need to ask, and they said our most critical business challenges we face today is accelerating revenue, minimizing the loss of any existing revenue, and having our organization, especially the field sales organization, be as effective as possible in the quest of executing those two tasks. Now, in an ideal scenario, it would be great if it was a customer that I could bring in with me, feedback that would support, this is what we've heard from your team, the marketplace, or my team, and here's specifically how we're going to make that happen based on what we know today as your trusted advisor. And that's sort of my segue to show how valuable in a world of big data, facts and insights, and we live in now a world of big data, that most of decision-making, as well as even strategizing in organizations, where it used to be maybe 80% intuition, 20% data, has really like flipped in the other direction, where organizations today are using as much as 70, 80, 90% of their decision-making based on data, facts, and insights, and 10 to 20% on intuition. So let's start off on this journey today and talk about a few grounding principles as it relates to the C-suite. First of all, we know, just as some grounding principles, well, before we get there, we got to make sure we got the confidence and poise when we get there. By the way, what we're talking about today, having these insights and facts and feedback, is a great element to have more confidence. Second, we know we've got to have this to be mutually beneficial. So it can't just be about us. You know, I was recently with an organization not long ago, and they were showing me their story that they go in and deliver to the executive suite, and I sat there and cringed a little bit, and I said, well, how is that beneficial to the customer? It's beneficial that you get your story there, but really the customer at that level wants to learn more about how you're going to help enable their vision, their strategy, their direction. Which takes us to the third really important grounding principle that we do not want to lose focus on, and that is ultimately this feedback that we have at our disposal helps us be the best possible strategic trusted advisor. And that's really what your customer at the higher levels of an organization is looking at. So when we talk about organizations, we like to think of our customers or businesses in three fairly unique stratas: the visionary or the senior level, the strategist at mid-level management team in our customers, as well as the operational team members, which we call resource team members. Now, one of the methodologies that we adhere to is every one of our customers and their customers have a unique area which we call the zone. And that zone is where the highest level of influencers reside pertinent to that specific industry segment, that supplier segment, whatever. So when I talk about the C-suite or the executive suite, I'm really referring predominantly for all of us to be cognizant of what our zone is with our customer. Now, if you also notice, I have something on the bottom here that says the customer's organization. By the way, this applies internally as well. In a few minutes, I'm going to talk about feedback we might want to have from our organization, because our engagement at the C-suite quite often could be not just with our customers, but even internally within our own organization. So senior level executives today in the zone, what are they looking for? Now, how do I know this? Well, we do an awful lot of voice of customer feedback work in relationship management, and these are some of the data points that we've parsed out from some of the senior leadership of those customers who provided feedback. They really want help and guidance. They really want economic impact or value from their suppliers. They really want business intelligence and forecasting that they do not have today from their own team. Now, what they're not looking for is what they already know. And they're extremely motivated by growth, market advantage, and opportunity. Go figure. They're accountable, as you'll see shortly, to their stakeholders and shareholders for revenue and profitability. Now, what are important key team members that you need to be cognizant of as we go through this process? One of the questions that I'm offering up very early here is, who is your champion within your customer that's going to help you along this journey? Because ultimately, your C-suite has very little time for idle chatter, and their time is extremely valuable. So when the engagement actually happens, it's got to have the most highest probability of value for both parties. Obviously for your customer in the zone, the C-suite, but also for you as a strategic supplier. Now, very simply, but very precisely, what's keeping the C-suite up at night? And as I go through these, this is probably the first segue to say these are probably points of importance that I should be gaining or having intelligence on or feedback, so I can speak to this when I do get to the C-suite. Definitely thinking about their competitive advantage or sustaining it on an ongoing basis. Definitely thinking about not just growth, but profitable growth, and quite often about minimizing costs, increasing revenues. Quite often about how they can best leverage their assets, their suppliers, their people. Quite often about how they can better serve their shareholders or stockholders, and how they can sustain that market dominance. And their legacy. What we do know is most people, a lot of people at this particular area, may not be in some of these positions for long periods of time, so they would like to make their mark. What is that mark they're trying to make for their organization? So here's a very important, maybe first point of the webinar. When I gather feedback, I want to make sure that I have feedback sufficient and rich enough so that I can link how us, as a strategic supplier, plays a key role in these factors that potentially are keeping the C-suite participants up at night. Now, I need to do a little bit of learning here, and this is where maybe the champion of your customer organization comes into play. And that learning is, what do your customers really need and value, and are we delivering on the promises that we've made? And a whole lot of different factors just came up, some being, as you see on the bottom left, the legend for people, some related to product solutions, some for organization. But I've got to get feedback around these critical factors so that I can translate this back to what it means most to the C-suite. All right? So these are just a few thoughts that, as you're getting feedback, very key things that we want to make sure we key in on. All right. Another, probably second, very important point here is I'm more than likely not going to just automatically be gathering feedback and going right out and engaging at the C-suite of my customer. I've got sort of this journey, I'm calling it the earning the rights of passage, I need to take. And I want to use my feedback all along to support me in this journey. I've got to deliver on the promise that my entire team I work with at my customer, I've got to have the credibility and they believe in our knowledge, our experience, and relevancy. I've got to first deliver on the promise. The second part of my journey is I've got to develop that rapport, that vision and trust. And I do that by listening, learning, and collaborating and being strategic. And specifically, at some point right here, I've got to make sure I have that champion in my customer to help me along that journey. And then finally, to have the most impact when I deliver this feedback to my customer, I've got to be in a position where I'm influential, that I'm really a valued resource. And I do that by demonstrating through this feedback, the facts and insights, how we're making an impact. How we're making an impact. A positive impact to whatever metric they use, whatever their success metrics are in their company. Not all the metrics might be monetized. Some might be. But whatever it is, we're playing a key role. And here's the feedback that shows from your team, from our team, and from the industry that we actually are playing a key role in enabling that for you. And ultimately, we're delivering value as learned and directed by the feedback. One of the challenges quite a few organizations have with their customers is they don't have the validation from their customer that they're actually making a difference. Feedback is that validation from your customer that you're making a difference. Now, let's talk about feedback a little bit. I've been throwing that term around quite a bit. When we think of feedback, we also think in terms of triangulation. And triangulation is having at least 3 dimensions or 3 points relevant to feedback. Where you're moving towards gaining access to the C-suite, we recommend that you have feedback from your team around this customer. You have access to some industry data, facts, insights to support where you're headed with this customer. And equally important, we have some direct customer relationship feedback. So feedback, as you see in the upper left, is most impactful and relevant when it's triangulated. It helps me increase my probability around my action planning for this customer that it's more right than wrong. And by the way, that is probably how I would present my feedback, my facts and insights to the customer, is I've got these multiple dimensions that I've considered, and it increases that these are probably how we're making a difference, or maybe what we might need to do to make a difference. I like to think of things as either process or system, and I'd like to offer up a potential system that's been very successful for obviously myself and others. And the system goes back a few years to the traditional need, feature, benefit, value world that we all lived in. The change here is that what we want to now do is use our feedback to validate what the specific needs, opportunities, issues, challenges are within our customer, so that as a team we can translate it into what feature, by the way, feature is quite often a product or solution, how that product or solution or organization in some cases can benefit the customer, and what value it has to this customer. But I've started my journey across a traditional model with much more validated and substantial feedback, voice of my customer. And it's not me telling them what to do, it's me feeding back to them, this is what they're asking me to do. And finally, my ability to take this benefit and value and even translate it and monetize it in some way around how we're going to reduce cost or help you avoid some cost or improve the revenue you're making today is the secret sauce here. Now, the real secret sauce of this recipe is when I meet with the C-level, I have to have this system done and in place because I really want to start with monetized value or my impacts, my most relevant impacts. I want to open it up and say, feedback has taught our team what is going to be most impactful for you, and this meeting is about how we're going to help you enable these results. And in some cases, not all cases, these results can have a profound positive economic impact on you and your organization. What does it look like when you do this with a customer? Well, you want to start using your feedback in your beginning stages of planning and relationship building with your customer. And when you do that, quite often, that's going to start at more of your champion level or your contact level, which may be a mid-level contact or operational level contact. And you want to begin this exchange. Now, a lot of suppliers today have things they call external business meetings or business reviews or ongoing meetings. We're not suggesting changing that. What we are suggesting is integrating into that process the feedback that you've been gathering and doing what we call closing the loop with your customer and gaining their interest, gaining their agreement, and validating that this is important facts and insights that you're discovering. Now, once I go through this whole process of working with my champion and customer to interpret it, align and get their validation, and do some progress reviews, ultimately, this journey should take me to the C-suite. And this is where I'm now well prepped, because I don't want to go there too prematurely. But now I'm well prepped because I've engaged their team, I've validated all this, they're in agreement with me, and when I now deliver the feedback at the C-suite, there's rationale of why I even have this meeting, because in many cases, it's their team taking me there. Because we're actually in mutual agreement how important this is and what a difference it can make in not just our relationship, but in their business. So what are some ways I can do that? And I'll call them strategies. I'm going to just explore 5 possible strategies here that we could gather the right feedback and then integrate that into our customer relationship management process. And by doing that, just to restate, it's going to help us engage with the C-suite or your zone, as we earlier defined. One of the first things I want to really make note of is every customer is going to have sort of the rule book of what you need to do to get to the C-suite or the zone. Heads up, it exists. You're going to need to ask your champion or your key contacts what that looks like and what that journey is, but we want to get that pin on the map. Everybody uses GPS systems with pins, sort of a destination. So ultimately, at some point, that's my destination, but I need to know what the journey is going to look like and what are those, as we said earlier, requirements, rites of passage that I need to execute, because I do want to meet with the people and bring my people as well, equal influencers meeting together. The second heads up before we get into 5 strategies is this is, for the most part, not an individual sport. It's a team sport. And what I mean by that is it really requires your team in support of providing feedback, but in support of working through some of these strategies. It's very ambitious to think that one account rep or a sales rep can do this on their own. So you got to look out there and say, what is the right team to help me as I start taking the journey? So what does the journey look like? The first strategy we recommend, and I've used that term several times already, the champion. And by definition, it's a very influential relationship that we meet with and becomes a strong supporter of us and helps guide us. And in some cases, might even take some risk on our behalf. Now, there's one very important factor here. That champion for us has got to be powerful enough or influential enough in our customer to enable us to ultimately continue on this journey to get to the C-suite. So we've got to ask ourselves right up front, and even as a team, what's in it for them? Because through this journey, they're going to help tell us the right actions, the right people to meet with, guide us in how to succeed, and the ultimate value of what we need to deliver, especially as it relates to delivering the feedback we provide. How long does it take? It varies by situation. I would say that as a rule of thumb, it's better to take a little longer than go in too prematurely without the facts and insights. Because as I said earlier, these are the facts and insights that your customer in the C-suite is expecting from you, and it's really the whole premise of the meeting. A second strategy is strategic knowledge, that intelligence is really power. And you got to ask yourself three basic questions. What do I know? How can this help this leader or an organization? And how do we mutually share so we mutually win? So I've really got to know, and some of this goes all the way back in the right kind of construct of what your relationship management survey, for example, or feedback process is. What am I learning? What am I gathering? What am I analyzing? So because is it about high impact solutions? Are they interested more in innovation? Are they interested more in competition, trends, or what other kind of facts? So I've got to make sure that I haven't been just capturing what I would call traditional satisfaction data. We're now into feedback on the relationship, which may contain operational satisfaction data, but we really want to make sure that the focus is how we're creating this ultimate win for our customer as a business. A third strategy is converting that feedback that we get either from our team and or the customer. By the way, customer is very strong. Get that feedback from your customer, high, wide, deep, and monetize it. And learn that how your customer is telling you back how you're helping them reduce expenses, how your customer's helping, how you're helping eliminate or avoid unnecessary expenses, and maybe in some cases get feedback on how you're helping them increase revenue or output. Okay, an example is quite possible within your survey of determining what the value you're delivering to your customer is, and in some cases asking your customer to quantify that value, because that is a very important data point along this process. The fourth recommendation here our strategy is to bring, as a result of the feedback of what you've learned, bring to the C-suite the experts that they may not normally have access to. As part of what you're learning, find out how important it would be to have advisors, innovators, technicians, experts, thought leaderships, best practice leaders as part of your team, because this is what your customer has been asking for. Example, we were engaged with a customer not too long ago that was spending significant amounts of money on sales skill development. We revamped their entire approach on getting feedback from their customer, and we found out two very important points. The first important point was the customer really didn't want to meet at that level with any more salespeople. But what the customer did want to meet with were business experts, people who could come in and guide their business. So all the investment that was made in sales skill development or practices, I don't say it was wasted, but some of that needed to be redirected in more vertical market expertise so that the people meeting with the customer, that customer team, could help guide and influence that customer's business. A great example of how you are impacting your customer by feedback, because without that, the customer would have to go out and get those resources from other places, and maybe in some cases pay for that. A fifth strategy is incorporating some forms of mutual scorecards, joint scorecards, performance scorecards, dashboards, collaborative action plans, so that as part of the process that we talked about earlier, that I've got this ongoing performance management process between us and our customer. And as part of that, the feedback is on there, because in that feedback, the feedback helps me identify what my strategic initiatives are. Now, we're going to have opportunities with our customer, and by the way, internally as well as externally, to use this feedback. Some very good examples is when we do our own team account planning. A core piece of the feedback should be, of the planning should be what feedback we have from the customer and how it applies to all levels within the customer. Another is our executive leadership meetings within our own organizations. It should be part of the cadence to review feedback, and that when your leadership team meets with the executive leadership team of your customer, a great opportunity to share these relationship metrics. There's collaborative action planning with your customer where this feedback fits really well. There's what a lot of companies are doing very well today, some of these external business reviews. Ask yourself a question. Are you really, do you have the voice of your customer integrated into that business review and what you're doing about it? Executive roundtables. What a great opportunity to share feedback and what we're learning and what we can do about it. I just spoke a little bit ago about a very metric-based scorecard detailing what the customer views and what you as a supplier view and where the variances are to make things all be aligned and more powerful together. And finally, certainly in one case, we have a customer that reports out to their shareholders that we're moving the needle and creating more loyal, responsive customers overall, and that's a focus of elevating our relationships and keeping our customers long term, because that particular management team and CEO really appreciate that translates into profitable revenue growth. One little suggestion as a tool that you might want to think about when you do this is some form of an ongoing collaborative action planning tracking model. And this, by the way, would play very well with your champion, but it also plays very well at the C-suite level. It's a great process every time you meet at these levels to revisit what you've talked about, identify those initiatives, and have an agreed-to work plan that are based on the feedback that you've heard. The feedback, by the way, on an ongoing basis can help us trend and track, are we making progress towards completing those so the impact the customer was expecting is realized. So what are all the benefits of these? Well, certainly to your organization, you can move customers from not just satisfied to more loyal and committed. You can have more superior long-term financial performance, and it's really helping you deliver on the promise of the customer. And if there is an issue, effective feedback processes will alert you of a problem before it becomes a real issue. And by the way, this knowledge is extremely powerful at all levels of your customer, especially as you're engaging a cross-functional team in servicing a customer. That feedback from the customer and that feedback by members of the cross-functional team that don't always talk to one another, consolidated and triangulated, is very powerful. And it goes without saying, the customer really benefits, because when you bring your team to the customer and all your feedback, you become this strategic resource that they didn't probably realize they have or had. You're actually gaining access to the right, they're gaining access to the right strategic resources and leveraging them as part of the existing relationship, and in some cases maybe for no incremental spend. And they're becoming much more aware of market changes and priorities because of your thought leadership, and they're able to move quicker, move more directly and focused. And your whole conversation is much more strategic than transactional. And ultimately, this feedback can be used to help monetize the whole delivery system and relationship. Now, there's quite a few quotes out there on the whole issue and value of feedback. I'll just review a couple. Jack Welch, who everybody is very aware of, I guess, from the GE days, is an organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action rapidly is the ultimate competitive advantage. Just think about how important that is when you take that learning to your customer C-suite. Customer satisfaction is worthless. Customer loyalty is priceless. And basically what they're saying there is by measuring the right elements from your customer and feedback, It can help your customer in no other way, in ways that they weren't even thinking, and they become extremely more loyal to you as a strategic supplier. Show value, create an experience, and always strive to exceed customer expectations. Feedback, communicated, and access to the C-suite helps set expectations and how you're doing against everyone in the organization, your customer organization's expectations. And consistency, consistency, consistency. Customers are valuing an average experience and less. They're really, really wanting an extraordinary experience or resource from their strategic supplier. When you have the right feedback and you integrate it into your relationship management process, it helps you justify why you should engage with the C-suite, because you're impacting their business, and why you're different than any other supplier in their current supply chain. So I guess in summary, first I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope you appreciate what's been closed and what a difference this can make in helping you gain access to the C-suite, but equally important, be more valuable when you get there. We live in a world of big data, facts, insights, predicting the future before people realize it. Feedback is what a lot of organizations are looking for every day, especially those at the top of the ladder in your customer organizations, because a lot of them coming up through these new generations are making decisions much more based on facts, insights, which we would say quantitative practices, versus the old traditional intuition or experience practices. They still play a role, but facts and insights are much more powerful. So I know we've got a few questions, and I'm going to turn it back to Denny to share back a few questions that we might have.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Dennis. The first question we have reads, so this person is in client services with little empowerment over the people who own the ability to make a lot of the strategies happen that you highlighted in the presentation. And they would like to know how they could possibly support this type of effort without the ability to directly drive some of those strategies. And I'm paraphrasing this question, I apologize.
No. I mean, I think it's a great point. I think that many times in organizations, client services or support organizations have a lot of insights to the customer that maybe the direct account team in some cases work with a customer don't have. So here's my suggestion. First of all, I think that somehow a couple things they could do is one, try to influence their own organization in being a little more cross-functional and making sure their voice is heard. So when you go back to the one triangle, I was talking about triangulation, that would be a very key point of influence or data that they could bring to more of a team for the customer. So that would be one thing I would do. And the second is I would sort of force myself to, in many cases, to be engaged as part of the customer management or account management process. And by the way, we've seen this very recently in customers that I would argue have some more transactional customers in the field, but the power of some of the existing CRM systems, putting the voice of what the customer support or service people have and integrating that into the traditional sales CRM system, it can be very powerful. So I mean, I guess my points is to try to change the culture and be more active in that, be a more valued, try to demonstrate how much more value you can be as part of a customer management team. And by the way, maybe on a select basis, go out there and make a few calls with customers and show how valuable it is. Another question, Danny?
This one says, excuse me, what if my customer does not allow me to leverage them? Are there any other plays I can make without these relationships?
I'm not 100% sure what that totally means as far as leverage them, but I'll take a crack at it. If what their customer, if what they're saying is their customer doesn't want to know too much about them, and because that's sort of opening the keys to the kingdom that could be sort of used against them, I think there's a bigger issue here, and the bigger issue is to demonstrate why this would be valuable for them or have such a positive impact. So I think you need to go back and get into a strategy session with your own team and say, look, you've either not communicated or branded why this can have such positive impact for the customer, because really it's like you're offering your customer this extremely important value add, and they don't want to take advantage of it. I would say it's probably because they either misunderstand or don't understand what the positive gains or wins are for them. So I think you've got to do a little bit of work and be more effective at being able to communicate why this is such, could be very powerful for them.
What if they're still holding you hostage at that level and not giving you access up the food chain?
Well, when you're the old stuck at the gatekeeper or the food chain, maybe in purchasing or something, I think you've really got to, and now you're going over into another topic we spend a lot of parts of our life around, this whole way of getting to the C-suite as far as relationships. There are some possible strategic plays, we call them, whether it be your management team to their management peer-to-peer, or putting yourself in some situations that your management team or even you may interact with their management and let it be their management team's idea to engage and take the pressure off of your sales or account management team to force that issue. But there are ways to do this. And by the way, I mean, I'm not going to be naive. There are situations, and we see those, that sometimes supply chain or purchasing is so powerful, right or wrong, that they just literally block out some very good strategic suppliers that could really help their customer. But there are these strategic plays that could be explored.
Okay, well, we have time for one more question. Excuse me. From your experiences, when could I expect to see results from doing such a program?
That's a great question, because, you know, we live in a world of 140 characters, which means everybody wants it now, immediately, and there's no patience. I would say that when we look at a really good relationship management, voice of customer relationship management program, I think it takes about a good 6 to 12 months to have some pretty good data, facts. By the way, it's very influenced, obviously, by the types of questions and methodologies and practices employed. So I think it could take 6 to 12 months to get some of those factoids that we need. I'm not saying you can't engage with the C-suite before that, but I would say once you start getting the first round of feedback and you start engaging with your champion in the management level, I would say that within a 24-month window, certainly within a 24-month window, I think you can start appreciating some wins, mutual wins between yourself and your customer. I think if you go back to that collaborative action plan I talked through, I think one of the key recommendations I would have is to get some low-hanging fruit, some immediate wins that you can identify in collaboration with your customer, so that I can and that would expedite, by the way, even more bigger, longer-term wins. But that's sort of the parameters that I operate on. I don't want to tell anybody, you know, you're going to be able to make this happen in 30, 60 days, because you're talking about some lifting here around the relationship that may not be in place. So I think that's
one last question. So would you recommend including C-level executives in the customer feedback program as a strategy with quotes around it to help gain access?
Yeah, you know, I absolutely would. I mean, now I say that, but to be very candid, I appreciate the challenge there. I definitely think, okay, so we do a lot of survey work across the globe in a lot of languages and gather thousands of data points. from a lot of times from different levels, operational contacts or decision makers. And there's no mystery that in the business world we live in today that the C-suite doesn't always engage. So you may have to tweak your script. You may have to have an internal advocate to get them to participate. It might have to be a little tighter. And maybe in some cases you might, not, don't hold me to this, but you may in some cases might need to have a paper version or something that your team uses. But I think if you can really get effective feedback, high, wide, and deep, and high certainly would be that C level. Wow, I mean, I can't think of anything more valuable that when you go back and re-engage, that you've addressed not only their team member feedback and what you're doing about it, but their feedback as well. So I think the answer is yes. I think it's harder. I think that it can be done. I've seen it done, but I definitely would recommend it.
Okay, and I think that's if there are any other questions, or if you think of one after the fact, because a lot of time our best thoughts come not at the moment we're experiencing what it is we're thinking about, please send them to my email address, which is on the screen, and the last line that you see there, Denny Chapman at chapmanhq.com. You'll also be able to go to our website, chapmanhq.com, and you'll find additional resources that speak to either customer feedback best practices or other metrics that are applicable to your customer and you may be able to utilize to either build those C-level relationships or maybe improve whatever it is that you're looking to do in the calendar year 2017. So I invite you to go to our website and check out the resources. Everything's free there. We're just trying to propagate the best practices, like I said, of relationship building and strategic account management. So I want to thank everybody for their time. I know everyone's busy, especially towards the end of the quarter, and we're starting to get there. We look forward to seeing everyone online again, and please keep an eye out in your email and maybe in your feeds for the slides and the recording of the webinar.
Thank you.
Take care.